Talks to end the war in Ukraine have begun. Officials from Russia and the United States met on Tuesday in Saudi Arabia. And this is what the general mood around those talks currently is.
The only leader in the world who can make this happen, who can even bring people together to begin to talk about it in a serious way, is President Trump.
It is only the US that can provide the deterrence to Putin that will prevent him attacking again.
Putin himself has repeatedly said that if necessary, he would be ready to negotiate with Zelensky.
Ukraine is not participating. Ukraine knew nothing about it.
I'm honestly a little irritated by this debate. The discussion is going over the head of the Ukrainians.
That in order for a conflict to end, everyone involved in that conflict has to be okay with it.
But two parties to that conflict, Ukraine and the European Union, weren't even invited to the talks table to begin with. Now, there's been assurances that this will happen, but who will these talks actually favour? It's what we're discussing today on News Desk. I'm Birish Banerjee.
And I'm Pablo Foley-Elias. I'll be looking at the questions and comments you post in the community chat and bringing them into the discussion. And we already have plenty of comments coming in that we picked out earlier that I can share. I'm just going to bring in a couple because there are some very strong opinions here. One from Freeman5110. Considering we're separated from Russia by an ocean, I'm assuming this person is in the United States, an island, a continent, referring to Europe, which includes the very much non-Russian Ukraine. I'd say Ukraine and Europe have a place at the table. In fact, the only one who has done absolutely nothing to earn a seat at the negotiating table is the coward Donald Trump. Then we have another viewer who's saying Zelensky has nothing to say about this. Ukraine would not exist if it wasn't for USA military aid. This war must end now. And one final one from Muhammad Akram 4303. This meeting was basically melting the ice between two world powers as they've drifted apart. Basically, they were standing on opposite poles. It's excellent performance by both leaders. Rather than criticising them, we should appreciate them. So that's some of the comments that we're getting from our viewers. And do please continue to send them in. And, of course, we'll be keeping an eye on them throughout the show.
So please keep those comments coming in. Pablo will try and bring those comments in, as many as possible from all of you guys. We really do look forward to those comments because of the variety of opinions and views that we get from you guys. Now, let's just introduce to you who all are sitting at the table. The man in the uniform there, Patrick Sensberg. He's a colonel in the German Reserves and he's also the head of the German Army's, the German Armed Forces Reserves Association. He's also from the opposition CDU, and we intend to talk to you about force levels in Europe potentially. But since you are, the head of the Bundeswehr's reserves, how many reserves are we talking about? How many reserves does the Bundeswehr have?
Well, actually, the number is quite high. We have around about 9 million reservists in Germany.
9 million reservists?
9 million, because of conscription we had in the last decades until 2011. So we have 9 million who has a status reservist, but 8 million are above 65 years of age.
Oh, wow.
So of course...
So on the books, very strong,
so
but otherwise...
It looks very strong, but we are 1 million below 65.
Though, right?
It's still a million, which is nevertheless a high number. And round about 45,000 are training regularly. So the other ones can be called again for duty. But 45,000 are continuously training every year. So it's not a small number, it's not a huge number. Of course, we are working on having more reservists in the Homeland Security. We are building on now 6 Homeland regiments. We will succeed with 12 in the end, Homeland regiments.
By when?
So this year we will see that the 6th regiment is here in Berlin located, will be ready, and then step by step we'll grow them to 12.
So at the moment, the strength of the reserves is under 1 million, of which 40,000 train regularly, 60,000 can be called over, so let's assume 1 million. Is that the number it should be at, or what is the number it should be at?
Normally, it should have 3 times more than the active soldiers. Our target is 203,000 active soldiers. And then 6 times more, you should have reservists for all kind of tasks the reserve is doing. Homeland security, but also a kind of second wave, third wave. As we say, wars are started with active soldiers and they are ended defended with reservists.
That's a good way of putting it.
I'm just curious, how do you decide how large your army should be? Like, where does the 203,000 come from?
It actually comes from the Cold War times. Then we shrinked the army, of course. We hadn't had that feeling of being surrounded by enemies anymore. We've been surrounded by friends only, so we shrinked it. We are now actually around about 180,000. So our task is also from NATO to deliver 460,000 soldiers in the end, 200 active soldiers, 260,000 reservists. For the number comes from NATO in the end.
That's a tall order. And interestingly, you were the only person from your party in 2011 to vote against the suspension of conscription or compulsory military service that existed in Germany until that point, March 2011, correct? That was the time.
Correct.
Right, we'll get into more of that with you. Let's not talk the debate down here. But glad to have you.
Yes, so many questions.
I know, glad to have you here. To Patrick's right is Nehal Johri, a veteran on the show, who is going to be providing us some context about where we are with all these talks. And there's lots of information that's been happening over the past week. Cherry Chan is back into the studio. She'll be looking at your comments in the chat and talking to you guys and dealing with any questions that the people in the chat have. But that's not all, right? You have a poll question as well?
Exactly. Like every week, we have a poll question for everyone. So this week, we are asking, are Trump-Putin talks the only path to peace? There are 4 options. Yes, peace at any price. Yes, compromises are needed. No, Putin can't be trusted. And no, Ukraine can still win. I am interested in what you guys think, and we will talk about the results later in the show.
And I am interested in what Patrick thinks.
Yeah.
What do you think? How would you vote? Are you at liberty to say that, or would you rather reserve
Of course,
your opinion?
I have my own opinion, definitely. Let me say in the beginning, the last question, I'm not 100% sure if that is the right question, because we always ask if Ukraine can win. Ukraine didn't start a war. Ukraine is defending the country. We should ask, can Russia win and occupy the whole Ukraine? I don't think so. It's a huge country. They started the war with less than 200,000 soldiers. How can you occupy and hold continuously a country that's so huge like Ukraine, a country that wants to fight for its integrity, for its sovereignty? So in the end, the question is, can Russia win? And I would definitely say no.
But maybe Vladimir Putin sees it differently in terms of how he would define a win. And we can talk about that later.
Yes.
But then, just for all of you guys who've been, I don't know if you've been following the amount of news. I mean, it's certainly been hard for us. The speed
were
at
talking
which the
about it. The
news
speed
has
at the
been
moment
coming, the
is-
pronouncements, the sound bites. So I think what we should do is try and get Nehal to try and recap for us where we are at right now and how we got to this stage that Russia and the United States are talking to each other for the first time in 3 years.
Well, I'm going to try my best to condense this because, as you said, it has been a hectic week. But before we get to the hectic part of it, I just want to take a look back at some of the very essential facts we need to know about the conflict that's going on. Russia currently occupies about 1/5 of Ukraine's territory. That's about 20%. And here's a fantastic map that I'd like to show you. If we can start sharing my screen. Excellent.
Just a reminder, if you cannot see properly the things on the screen, I will put the link here now so you can follow.
Thanks, Cherry.
So you can access it from the chat where Cherry's posting it. Well, this map shows you where Russia's military troops are in Ukraine and how their positions have changed over time since February 2022, which is when Russia started the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And the map is based on data from the Institute for the Study of War and a couple of other institutes. I'm just going to start playing it. Initially, Russian troops got really close to Kyiv, which is the Ukrainian capital, and several missile attacks were actually fired from neighboring Belarus. But Ukraine did manage to regain the territory and the territory in the north. As you see the orange disappearing there, that's areas like Sumy, Kharkiv. And Ukraine also launched several other counteroffensives in 2022 and 2023. But if you now watch very slowly, what happens is that the war begins to stagnate. So I'm going to pause here just for a second so that you can see. As it goes towards January 2023, you'll see that the front line stops moving. You'll see very minor changes. And that front line, honestly, hasn't moved in the last 2 years. And the areas in orange that you're still seeing are occupied, such as Donetsk, Luhansk, and the areas around Zaporizhia nuclear power plant.
It is so interesting. Sorry to interrupt there. It's just that this movement is so minimal on this map. You can't see it. You need to zoom in literally to the left side edges of that shading. But the consequence of that has been that thousands of soldiers have been dying. I think the Russian, the figure that Western intelligence came up with is more than 1,000 Russian troops dying a day. And the Ukrainians have been more tight-lipped about their casualties, but one can imagine a similar number on the Ukrainian side. I didn't mean to interrupt, but please.
No, please go on. Yeah, we don't need the map anymore. We should really not forget that, tens of thousands of people have died in the last 3 years. And the United Nations estimate is that nearly 4 million people have been internally displaced in Ukraine. And we're also talking about lots of villages and cities that have been destroyed. That's a very, very rough picture of the events in the last years. But in the last 24 hours, a lot has happened. So we've seen delegates from the US and Russia meet in Saudi Arabia to discuss how the war might end. So there was US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and from the Russian side, there was Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. What's jarring, of course, is that there were no Ukrainian leaders at these talks. So for the longest time, US foreign policy was that, under Joe Biden, that nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. That has clearly changed. And we heard from Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky in a clear statement where he said he wasn't invited to the talks. And to show his discontent about the situation, he delayed a trip he was supposed to make to Saudi Arabia to March, and so he won't be there. And then President Donald Trump responded to that comment. Just remember, the comment came from Florida. He's not really in Saudi Arabia where the talks were being held. And he appeared to be actually putting the blame on Ukraine. Let's take a listen to what Donald Trump had to say.
And I think I have the power to end this war. And I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
So that's where we are now. The war is about to enter the fourth year next week.
That's Monday, isn't it? That's
Monday, 24th.
When 3 years end.
Yeah, negotiations to stop it are underway, but Ukraine, as well as the rest of Europe, have been frozen out of it.
And that's what. Thanks for that, Nehal. That was a good recap for where we are at. I don't know, Patrick. When you heard Donald Trump saying Ukraine should never have started it, what was your reaction to that?
First, I want to point out concerning the map. It shows very clear how horrible this was. The contact line is not moving since months. People are dying every day in a horrible war. We have winter now, it's cold. We see injuries like in the First World War. Sometimes Ukraine soldiers fight at the same places as they fought for the Second World War. So it's a really, really horrible war. So it's good that we try to end this war with negotiations. It's unacceptable that Ukraine is not on the table yet. And when I listened to Donald Trump's words, I was not sure if we should take them as so important. Let's see if we get angry by every sentence that Donald Trump said, we are not focusing on the important issues. So of course, Ukraine has to be on the table. There will be no peace without Ukraine because it's about Ukraine. So in the end, Ukraine will be on the table. Europe has to be on the table. So because it's directly at the gates of Europe, when you are in the Baltic states, you can hear the artillery nearly. So in the end, Europe has to be on the table. There will be a continuous peace just with Europe and Ukraine if we don't talk about a ceasefire for a little bit of time, a few months, and then Russia is moving again. If we talk really about peace talks, then we all have to be on the table, and that will be very difficult because I think Russia don't want this.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned the Baltic states there. I just want to sort of bring out one point here, that you had this emergency summit that President Emmanuel Macron organized after that historic Munich Security Conference that you were at as well. This happened on Monday, and the Baltic states can hear the artillery, but they weren't a part of the conference on Monday. I'm just wondering what that says about European unity, or how how France views other European nations that are virtually at the forefront of what could be a future war.
Definitely. So we have to divide between military and politically platform. So politically, I think we have to work that we talk with one voice, that we are consistent, that we have a strategy, that we have a clear target what the outcome should be. And on the other side, military, we work already together. So nearly no mission, no headquarter, nothing works just with one nation. So we are international. So in the end, military, we are much stronger than politically. Politically, I think we don't have found our core point, how we argue and how we discuss with Trump. So in the end, there will be no real peace without Europe. Also, Trump will understand that, and he knew it already. Obama already knew it when the war started in Crimea. So in the end, we will have just successful negotiations, and Trump will just get a deal with Europe.
That's the discussion on Europe does not end. We will continue it. But here I'd like to welcome another guest, Peter Trubowitz. He is a professor of international relations at the London School of Economics. Welcome, Professor. I wonder, can you see us? Because I'd been promised you'd be able to see us. Fantastic,
good to see you.
Brilliant. One of the miracles of technology. You've heard what Donald Trump said last evening. Why does the American president believe that Ukraine started this war?
I think what Trump was basically doing was amplifying what was happening in Riyadh in the negotiations between the U.S. and the Russians. It's basically an effort to structure the negotiations over the war in a way that is, frankly, less about guaranteeing Ukrainian security than it is about realigning U.S.-Russian relations. I think that's really the story in Saudi Arabia, and I think Trump doubled down on it in that press conference by blaming Ukraine for starting the war, which is, it's a form of like strategic gaslighting. I mean, there's nothing to it. And if if you believe that Kiev started the war, I've got a bridge in Brooklyn that I'd like to sell you.
I'm sure we'll buy that bridge. But then you talked about realigning the U.S. and Russia relations. Why does Donald Trump need to use Russian talking points to do that? Because this whole idea that Ukraine started the war is a Russian talking point. And Foreign Minister Lavrov even thanked Donald Trump for virtually blaming Ukraine and Ukraine's ambitions to join NATO as a cause of the war. So why repeat Russian talking points to realign U.S.-Russian ties? That is surely not strength.
Well, I mean, I think your starting point, or I think the implicit assumption, is that if you're trying to get a deal, a negotiated, let's say, a just settlement to the war in Ukraine, you would never start that way. You wouldn't make the concessions up front. But if your goal perhaps is to achieve other geopolitical ends, let's say putting Russia in play in America's rivalry with China, this is a kind of Nixon in reverse dream that Donald Trump has had for a while, then you might be prepared to do those things, which is essentially sacrificing Kiev at the altar of some larger geopolitical end.
It is very interesting you are saying that because as luck would have
I'm not agreeing with it. I'm just trying to lay out what might be the logic.
Yeah, no, you're analyzing it. I'm not saying that is what is happening. You're analyzing it. But just based on the point that you're making, I wanted to play a soundbite of retired General Keith Kellogg, who is Trump's special envoy to Ukraine, incidentally in Ukraine today. This is a soundbite from him speaking at the Munich Security Conference over the weekend. Patrick, I don't know, you might have heard this soundbite. I'd like to play this soundbite in which Keith Kellogg is talking about what potentially the United States might want to do with Russia. Let's just listen to what Mr. Kellogg had to say.
What we're going to try to do is basically force him into actions. What you want to do is force him to actions maybe he's uncomfortable with. What I mean by that, as an example, right now is what we're going to do is try to break this alliance that he currently has. He's got an alliance around with North Korea that wasn't there before. He's got an alliance with Iran that wasn't there before. He's got an alliance with China that wasn't there before, meaning 4 years ago before.
So that was a soundbite given to Sarah Kelly from a conflict zone, which is, again, a DW program at the Munich Security Conference. Based on that soundbite, Peter, it would appear that the American goal here is to get closer to Russia so they can break the alliance with China. So when Donald Trump says he wants to end the killing and he wants to bring peace, he's being insincere?
I think he thinks it will end the killing. That is, that there will be, Russia will end up with a large chunk of Ukraine, and that if he establishes closer relations with Putin, that there's a bigger game to be had, and that, but I think the level, Ukraine, I don't think is Donald Trump's primary concern. Let me just say something here too. Putin can assess electoral results as well as the next guy. And Donald Trump did not win a mandate. So one of the implications of the U.S. position of going down this path is, it's not obvious, let me just say, that Putin would sign on board and, loosen his ties with China. Donald Trump could be here for 4 years, and Putin doesn't know who will come next. And it could be, a Democrat that wants to recommit to Europe and so forth. So, there's no certainty in this kind of move. What Kellogg is talking about, these are the internal talking points inside the administration, and there's a geopolitical logic to it. How stable, how certain all of this is, I think, is questionable.
Sitting here in Europe, Patrick, how do you look at these kind of moves, if you can call it that?
I think Trump needs a success, needs external success. He has got a lot of internal problems and issues. He fired a lot of people, which is an issue in the US. He has the conflict with the Palestinians. So in the end, I think he needs an international success. So he's also under pressure. And he wants to hand over the pressure, of course, to Ukraine. But he also said a lot of things in the direction of Russia, that if not, there will be not successful peace talks. He could support Ukraine much stronger, he said earlier times. So in the end, I think he tries to put pressure on both sides, that in the end he will succeed with his idea of negotiations. And so we are in the role also to describe he will fail if he don't accept Europeans on the table, Ukraine on the table, and a good result of peace talks. And I'm afraid of ending with a bad result, which caused more problems in Europe than less.
Peter, I don't know if I introduced the gentleman just talking right now. That's Patrick Sensberg. He's the head of the German Armed Forces Reserve Association, in a way bringing in the European perspective here. I apologize if I didn't do that earlier. I was too busy introducing you, and I wanted to ask you that question. so yeah, that was Patrick there with his view. But just, staying with Europe, Donald Trump's Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, last week stunned NATO when he said that, European and non-European troops would have to guarantee any security, any peace in Ukraine, and then U.S. boots would not be on the ground. So if the Americans want the Europeans, or whichever unnamed non-Europeans, to guarantee the peace in Ukraine, does it not make sense to have the Europeans on board, because they are going to have to provide security later? So why not talk to them? What is this idea behind not even consulting with the Europeans?
Well, I think probably the view is that once the parameters are set, as they were, I think perhaps some of them were set in Saudi Arabia yesterday, the Europeans will have nowhere to go but to follow, and the Ukrainians as well. And so I don't disagree with the proposition that that the Trump administration, to the extent that it wants to push peacekeeping forces on the ground to provide some minimal, like a tripwire and a minimal security guarantee for Ukraine and for Europe more generally, that it would like it to be European forces. It'll have a hell of a time getting American forces out of a Republican Congress. But they might be prepared, the U.S. side, and I think this is potentially where you might get an agreement, is European troops and U.S. military equipment purchased by the Europeans from the U.S., something like that. Trump is very transactional. So you could maybe see some space there for a negotiation. But I think he sees this as something that's maybe further down the line. To the extent that Trump is looking over the horizon, and looking kind of down the road. I will say, just let me respond, if I might, to that Trump needs a success. Trump is quite capable of calling a failure a success. Mm-hmm. He did that in the case of Afghanistan with the negotiated agreement there. This is a fellow that has a very high future discount rate.
I want to bring in Patrick there because I noticed your face when the comments were made there about the American military equipment and then the European troops. Give me your thoughts on that, because I think you reacted, and I was immediately wanted to know more.
Definitely, we already.
I couldn't see it.
I thought you could see us.
You would have reacted, though. You would have reacted.
So of course, we're talking already now about the equipment that is used when European troops are securing a peace that we haven't negotiated yet. And I have no problems with buying also military equipment from US. We're buying the F-35, so we don't have to develop everything by ourselves. There's also a question of prices and so on. So I have no problem with buying if there are military needs from the US side. The equipment is good, and if it's more expensive to develop it by ourselves, we should faster buy equipment from the US side or other parties. I have no problem. But to connect it now with delivering peace troops in the Ukraine, that's really a problem, because peace troops will just be successful if the circumstances work. So, for example, where will be the Russian troops after the peace treaty or whatever it will be in the end? Will they stand in the occupied territories? Will they stand right behind the border with the tanks? And will the European troops look in the guns of the Russian troops? How can they do their job then? Normally you have areas without military from both sides, from 50 miles, 100 miles, without military of both sides. I don't think Russia will ever expect drawing back their troops, not just from the occupied Ukraine territories, also in Russia from the borderline. But how does peace contingent, or however it's called, can be successful if you look directly in the guns of the aggressor? Mm-hmm. So in the end, we are far from a real peace settlement in the end, so we shouldn't talk about the weapons. I think we have a few weapons left in Germany.
At this point, let's just bring in a voice from Ukraine. Both of you gentlemen stay with us. Peter, Patrick, you're in the studio. Peter, if you could just stay on the line. I'd like to bring in Kira Rudik. She's a Ukrainian MP and head of the opposition Holos Party. She joins us now on the line. Kira, welcome. I don't know if you got a lot of what we were saying. We were just talking about this American idea, at least the one that Pete Hegseth gave to NATO, saying that, there needs to be European peacekeepers potentially at the end of any settlement. We were just sort of trying to parse that through and see if that works. How does Ukraine respond to the idea of European/non-European peacekeepers being on Ukrainian soil, guaranteeing any deal that has been agreed to?
Hello, and thank you so much for having me. Well, we look at Europe as our friends and allies, but I agree with the previous speaker that let's figure out what do we want to achieve and how would we achieve that? Mm-hmm. Because basically having European forces on our soil is a tool and it has to have some meaning. So right now, the key baseline to any negotiations, to any agreement is the security guarantees, is how do we make sure that Russia would not attack us again, right? Right. And we know for sure that whatever deal there would be, Russia will try to break. And we know that for a fact because we have been in this ceasefire since 2014. And I can tell you there was not a single day since that time when Russian troops would attack us here and there. So right now we need to figure out like what's the way of making sure that if there is an agreement, then Russia would not break it. And I think without first lining up, like, does Russia even agree to stop their war of aggression, and then figuring out like what we want to achieve? Like, we are talking about the details right now.
No, that is true. That is true. I'm sorry to interrupt you. That is quite true. But just the idea that European troops, there'd be European boots on the ground. I mean, your president was giving an interview and he was talking about, he was comparing brigades, yeah? He was talking about Ukraine having something in excess of 100 brigades, Russia in excess of, 250, around that number, and Europe in total having something like 50 brigades. Just purely in terms of troop numbers, they don't add up. European troops are not so much of a deterrent, and therefore I believe President Zelensky keeps talking about a U.S. guarantee. Keir Starmer talks about a U.S. backstop. Any European troops on the ground don't work without a U.S. guarantee, do they?
No, it depends on like what amount of brigades Europe will be able to get here, right? But let's make it very clear. Right now, Ukraine and Russia has like the longest front line, I think, in the recent history. It's 1,300 kilometers. So if you just imagine how many troops you would need to support that and to stop that interaction, that would be far more than we are talking both with the United States, with Europe. It would be huge. Second point, which is very important, and I think many of our allies don't take into consideration, this war is very different from what everyone has seen in Afghanistan, anywhere else, because this is the war of drones and artillery and missiles. So it will be very hard to say like which drone came from where and how do you actually protect the peacekeeping troops from these attacks. I don't think that we have a very good idea right now. So again, there is this saying in Ukraine about the peacekeeping troops from abroad. We say that we never have asked for anyone to help us defend our country. Like, we are doing that and our army is doing it in a very good way. So if you want to send someone, the question is, are you sending them with the weapons? If yes, maybe you should send the weapons first and then figure out if you should send people, because this is what we are missing right now. We are missing the means to fight back, to get going, and not additional troops. And then there is a question: what would happen if German or British soldier is being killed at the battlefield by Russian drone?
Right.
Like, what would that mean?
And that is something that I do want to come to Patrick
There's
on,
a comment here as well, actually. I just want to jump in because it's related to what we're obviously talking about here about the troops. From a viewer here, Nico says, NATO pledged 700 billion in support of Ukraine. Why is no one talking about that? So I'm curious to know what you think about that comment, because, I mean, it was discussed, right?
Yeah, the question is, and it's related to what we heard before, what can we do? At what kind of state of time are we supporting with money? Are we continuously supporting with ammunition and of course, with weapons? We should do that definitely much more than we did. We saw it on the map. We had several times where Russian troops went backwards. We had the chance to support Ukraine more, and we didn't. Russian troops could get settled in the places where they are now. We had several points in time where we really could, with lots of more ammunition and weapons, push the Russian troops out of Ukraine, but we didn't. So the question is, how can we support? Of course, with money, but with ammunition in the first and with weapons in the second. But then we talk about supporting Ukraine fighting against Russia's invasion more and more. If we talk about the peace talks, it's not the question of money at first. It's a question of how will this peace look like.
Yeah.
And I can't see that there is any agreement from the Russian side whether they would accept where international troops can be involved if they don't want to be part of the war.
You know, let's put that question to Peter. Peter, what is the American plan? Can you look into your secret file and just let us know what the American plan is? Or give us some directions.
I'm not sure that they know. Nobody.
Are they making this up as they go along?
Yes, I think they're making this up as they go along. I think the idea of an opening to Russia is an old one for Donald Trump, and he would have preferred to do it during his first term in office. And I think he's seizing this moment to be able to, to push that forward. But I think given all the complexities of reaching an agreement, some of this is made up as you go along. Part of it is to see where everybody's red lines are, and where the Ukrainians can be pushed and where the Europeans can be pushed. I think for the US or for Trump, there are some red lines. I don't suspect that we will see US boots on the ground in any kind of a peacekeeping force, no matter how much Zelensky might want that and prefer that to European forces. That doesn't mean the U.S. might not play some kind of logistical support role like Keir Starmer has proposed. I assume he's proposed that thinking that the traffic might bear that in the U.S. Trump is very sensitive and attentive to domestic politics in the United States, and there's just not a huge appetite for the continuation of, American involvement, engagement in the war in Ukraine. Frankly, there would have been a push toward some negotiated settlement if Kamala Harris had won. It would have been quite different, though, much more orderly, and would not have been this kind of shock and awe treatment that Europe got at the Munich conference and everybody else.
Yeah, that J.D. Vance speech, although everyone was expecting was going to be about Ukraine, nothing about Ukraine. But just on that interesting point about the support for sending aid to Ukraine, Patrick, Europe, the story is similar, right? There is a much lesser appetite, isn't there, amongst at least the population in Europe to send more aid and continue with this Ukraine war at a time that prices continue to rise?
I think the aid is there. We want to deliver more. That's not the issue. To see the war continuing, there is definitely no appetite, and to be involved with troops, definitely no. But that's not how I understood it, what Ukraine needs. They need military support right now, not to get in a position where negotiations are not possible anymore. So we know that we have to deliver now from European side, and we can. It's not like that we all look to the US side. Look, Germany as one country of the European Union is the second largest delivery of ammunition, of weapons, and so on. And more is possible if it's needed, and it's needed. And I think there is a lot of potential in France to deliver more. So in the end, we have to consolidate our position. We listened to the speech of J.D. Vance in Munich. We knew already what he would say. We didn't know what kind of language he used and what kind of wording he had. But we knew that he wants us to take more responsibility. We should already have done it. We should already have said, we are the main supporter of Ukraine. That would have made lots of issues clear. But if we talk about peace, it's on a different side. Because a peace must secure on a long time that both sides won't fight anymore, must bring Ukraine in a position that not in 2 or 3 years Russia is consolidated and marching forward to Kiev again. So in the end, there is much more in peace talks than we talk about just strength and weapons. And again, I can't see that Putin is accepting any kind of this. So I'm very doubtful if we see really a peace agreement.
Let's see what Kira thinks. Kira, what are Ukraine's red lines when it comes to any a negotiation? I ask you because some of these red lines have been made public in the past. When you talk about President Zelensky's victory plan from October, from last year. But I'm just wondering, within the present context, what are Ukraine's red lines?
Well, first, I would agree that it all goes to the bigger scheme of things. For us, we do not believe that even if there is a peace settlement, that Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, who obviously work together and collaborate a lot on the development of the missiles, drones, any kind of military equipment. So we don't believe that they would stop if there is a peace deal. So we need a clear understanding on what's going to happen once they feel that they are strong and continue marching forward. So this is one piece. Of course, we are not ready to legally accept different borders that Ukraine has right now. We are a sovereign country. We gave up our nuclear weapons in 1994, which was obviously a mistake. But we had the promises of the United States, United Kingdom, and Russia to support our borders and our freedom. That obviously didn't happen. And
so why are you
President
sure?
Zelensky...
Sorry, that was the Budapest Memorandum of 1994. So why are you sure any guarantee written on paper now will be followed?
And I can tell you that mostly Ukrainian people do not believe that. And this is why it's bringing us to this major question of the security guarantees. And this is why when you're asking me about the red lines, I'm saying, well, it all has no sense until we figure out something that is workable. And for us, of course, in the matter of security guarantees was taking the controlled territories of Ukraine into NATO, which we have heard different statements of if that's going to happen, but that was one of the ways. Other ways would be very difficult to prove that would work, because we understand that anything that is written, anything that somebody swears on can change when the administration changes, right? And because we are all democracies, we hope that these administrations will keep changing, and that's why we don't know what's going to happen. But coming back to the red lines, we may accept that we will delay taking back some of Ukraine's territory, but legally we wouldn't give up on them. And we will not accept decreasing Ukrainians' military, changing them, our ability to figure out which alliances or which agreements we will be joining. Of course, it means you joining EU or NATO, at least having it in our aspirations. We will not accept if there is no justice for the war criminals. And I think this has not been talking enough about, but this is very critical for us. This would be a red line 100%, because as of right now, 80% of Ukrainian families have either someone fighting at the front line or have they lost someone at the front line or at the brutal attacks. So we all have very much lost in this war. And for people who raped, murdered, and who committed all kinds of these war crimes, who were stealing Ukrainian children, kidnapping them and moving to Russia, they have to be accountable.
I just want to direct one question to Peter. I'll just come to you.
Yeah, sure.
It's just one question to for Peter to wrap the American perspective for us, if you like. Just based on everything that Kira was saying, Peter, do you believe that Ukraine can actually rely on the United States to provide them justice, to provide a just deal?
Well, I think this is a great question. And I thought Kira's comment about the potential strategic implications of not upholding one's commitments is a topic of conversation. It does not get enough airtime in the United States. I think there are two serious strategic implications for the United States if it ends up with a very bad agreement with respect to Ukraine that really disproportionately favors Russia. One strategic implication for countries like Japan and South Korea and Poland in that kind of world where might makes right and American security guarantees are not worth the paper that they're written on, the only way to protect yourself is to go nuclear. And that is one of the implications that, one can draw from this war. There's another one, it seems to me, which is that if America is willing to accept the proposition that coercion pays in Europe, where the United States has long-standing security commitments and guarantees to other nations' security, that long predate Ukraine, its relationship with Ukraine in the war here. Why shouldn't it also pay in other regions, i.e. East Asia, where the U.S. has similar commitments to other countries. So, you know, what I worry about in the American context is that there is not enough discussion of this. It's not that there aren't people who understand this, but frankly, it is just not part of the discourse there, just like I think in the European context, there's just not, the question people need to be asking themselves is what can Trump concede to Putin diplomatically and get away with domestically in the United States? And the answer is a fair amount.
It's
answer is a fair amount.
It's a lot to chew on. Peter, thanks so much for sharing your views on that. That was Peter Trubowitz, Professor of International Relations, London School of Economics. Peter, thanks so much for spending your time
Great
with
to
us.
be with you. Thank you. Bye.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Peter.
Take care. Bye.
Well, we've got plenty of comments coming in, and there's a few actually that I want to put to you, Ciara. We have some comments here, one from Oscar Navas, who says Trump and Putin are on a pact which is like the tiger and the lion are deciding what to do with the fawn. And then there's a question put to you from one of our great viewers, Carolina Vilena, who always gets involved in the chat.
Hi, Carolina.
Ciara, it says, the question is directed at you. Would you support any peace deals proposed by Donald Trump? And of course, this would be in the context of what we've heard Donald Trump say in the past 24 hours. So I'd like to get your take on that.
Well, it will come down to how do we know that it's not like Donald Trump's peace deal, but this is a good deal for Ukraine that is executable and is bringing us to what we want to achieve. Because I want everybody to hear me very clearly that Ukraine is the country that wants peace the most. It's us being attacked every single night. It's our people dying every day and living under the terror, our kids studying in bomb shelters. So you can imagine that we are looking towards the peace. The problem is that we have already tried some of the things in the past, and we know how badly it worked for us. That after the peace deal of 2014, Russia gathered their troops and attacked us in 2022. So it comes down to assurance what would happen if Russia will attack us again. The truth is, nobody knows. Nobody has like a very good idea, because at the end it comes to the point, and I will be very blunt here, are the countries ready to go into direct conflict with Russia?
Correct.
And I do not think that they are right now.
And let's bring in Patrick over there. Patrick, you were saying that there is no appetite in Europe to send any form of peacekeeping troops, whatever the definition of peacekeeping is. Point is, no European boots on the ground in Ukraine. There is no appetite for that. So based on what Ciara is saying, the only way you can assure that any future Russian aggression is going to be repelled is someone is going to have to fight it physically. Who is that going to be if not the Europeans?
Yeah, as long as we see it now, it's Ukraine who are fighting a really brave war against Russia, and they succeed until yet. A lot of experts say in the beginning they won't last 2 or 3 days, military experts. I would be so sad and angry if I would be a Ukrainian soldier and somebody says we're not fighting longer than 3-4 days. They were all wrong since a long time.
So Ukraine is the best guarantor for Ukraine's security?
Of course, they're fighting the war for us also. Go to the Baltic states, go to Moldova, go to Romania. There are a lot of Russian troops close by. Also, when you look to Moldova, if Maria Sandu, the president of Moldova, looks a little bit further, they can see the Russian troops there. And she knows how aggressive Russia is. If we look into other countries, how much pressure Russia keeps on these countries, if we see their ideology about the Holy Rus being established again on the territory.
Those fears are known, but sorry to interrupt you, Patrick, but it's just like, ultimately, Ukraine needs some sort of a guarantee, right? I mean, if you're saying that the best guarantee for Ukraine's security is the Ukrainian soldier, fine. But if that were the case, why are we having talks about ceasefire or anything right now? The question is what happens in the future. Who puts their hand up and say, OK, we will assist the Ukrainians and provide that backstop? It's only the United States that can do that, unless NATO decides to bring Ukraine in. I mean, there was a consensus on that last year, wasn't there, on an irreversible path to NATO membership. The US now says that is out of the of any discussion. What about the rest of the European members? Why don't they say, no, this is still on the table?
I think it's the second step. The first step is what kind of peace we have. If we know what kind of peace agreement we see, then we could discuss if it's possible to have European troops there. In a peace agreement, that's not worth the name. If we just have a small ceasefire, I think, as you said, the appetite is not very huge to send troops in a temporary ceasefire, because, you know, we are not securing peace. In the best form, we would try to, with a robust mandate, try to bring peace, and that's not the question. Then we are part of the war. So in the end, it's all a question what kind of deal we will see, and that's why Europe should be on the table, because if we get an agreement that's not worth it, then nobody will engage. Then Ukraine, I think, will not accept it, and then Trump lose his face. Okay, we can say he many times already did it, but then we don't see in the end a peace, because as I understand Ukraine, they won't stop fighting against the aggressor, even if there is a kind of agreement.
It is because it is their country, they are going to fight. Kira, just listening to this, I'm just trying to get my head around this whole idea of the security guarantee. I mean, what is the guarantee that if Russia attacks tomorrow or whenever, after whatever peace deal is worked out, that won't happen or that it'll be repelled? Are you comforted by what you are hearing in terms of what the Europeans want and what the Europeans can offer?
Well, we are grateful for these words of support, but we cannot fight Russia with the words of support. There was a very decent time where we were able to push them away from our territories if we had enough of the weapons and supplies. And we did not get them, or we did not get them in time. So right now, for us to understand that we can defend ourselves against Russia moving forward again and again, we just need all this amount of weapons and supplies. And the question is, does Europe have enough of those Patriot missile systems? And I know that they perhaps don't, but the air defense systems, planes, artillery systems, something that would help us fight right now, and something that would help us ensure our security in the future. But again, we will go down in this conversation to this at time, and I will jump there quickly. Russia is a nuclear state. So at the end, if they feel that they are losing, they feel that they have been pushed away, who can assure us that they wouldn't just nuke Kyiv? And if you think that that's not happening, I'm telling you that this week, Russia has targeted a drone onto the Chernobyl nuclear plant. Chernobyl, that brought this devastation, radiation to Europe. So kids in Ukraine know that you shouldn't be going anywhere nuclear station and anywhere near Chernobyl. Russia is sending the armed drone that way and damaging the sarcophagus. So
is the only security guarantee that will hold any water in the future for Ukraine the idea that Ukraine goes nuclear? Is that what needs to happen?
It seems yes. In the modern world, where security guarantees are not worth the paper that they are signed on, your only way of securing yourself is becoming a nuclear state.
Is that something that Europe would encourage Ukraine to do?
I can speak for whole Europe. I can understand the opinion, and politically, I can really understand it, and also other politicians understand this question. It's already mentioned how other countries think about that their security can be just secured when there are nuclear powers. But I just want to add one important thing. Europe can do much more, because it said Europe can't. If we continuously lower, underestimate, and make it small, our contribution, if we continuously talk about that Ukraine can't stand for much longer, we make Russia stronger. Ukraine fights so brave, and Russia couldn't do anything. We can support much more. We should shouldn't bring us in a bad position for the talks.
Patrick, I'm sorry to interrupt you again, but I've forgotten the number of people I've interviewed when it comes to the war in Ukraine, and the talking point has always been about supplies to Europe. This was there from day one. I remember first it was about 155 mm artillery shells, then it was about whether there is NATO equipment available, whether there's guns available, how it's being transported. Ukraine has always been falling short of weapon supplies, whether it's from the US or the Europe. So this has not changed at all, if I'm wrong, in the past 3 years. Why should things become better now if they haven't been good in the past 3 years?
Because we don't have to wait for our alliance, US, anymore, because we did everything.
The US was holding Europe back?
We talked about tanks, for example. We talked about missiles. So we stepped back. Let me point it like this. Germany stepped back behind our alliance because we maybe felt better, more comfortable in that position, that we don't have to deliver. So as Kira already pointed out, there were several points with more ammunition, with more weapons. We could have done much more. From the military perspective also. So we failed in that time, definitely from my point of view. But right now we're at a point where negotiations maybe start. If we continuously say what we can't do, but we can. Right. We should talk more about what we can do if it's needed.
Let me bring that to Kira. Kira, just a logistical question before I ask you an editorial one. Can you stay beyond the next 5 minutes, or do you have to leave in the next 5 minutes?
Yeah. Yes, I can stay for the 5 minutes. I want to finish what we have started.
Yes,
so
please.
I want to ask, are you going to send us Taurus missile systems?
From next week on.
If Friedrich Merz
becomes we have elections. I know that you know that, and I think we will have a change in the government. And I'm quite sure that this is one of the first issues that's on the table. And as I heard the discussions in the last week, the position of the former month that the actual chancellor have will not be the position of the future government.
Assuming that Friedrich Merz of the CDU comes into power.
Right.
But Kira,
and we have to see about the coalition and so on, but that's what I heard.
Yeah.
But this is super important because this is something that we are discussing right now, right? Like what can be done more.
Yes.
And the Taurus missile systems is something that we desperately need.
Yes, but I'm not the spokesman of a future government, of a potential future government.
I know, I understand that. So I'm not taking your word and putting it here in Ukrainian news, right?
Yeah, that wouldn't be the problem, but it's not worth so much.
The usual caveat.
But we understand that if right now Europe will start removing the obstacles that it was putting in front of itself in terms of supplying Ukraine with weapons, ammunition, fighter jets, etc. Even if that is done, we will already be in a better position, maybe not for negotiation, but just for standing against any daily and nightly attacks. I don't know if you have talked about this during this program, but it's every single night. We are spending in our bathtubs or under the stairs or somewhere where it is safe, because Russia is sending like about 200 drones and some missiles every night towards peaceful cities. We are not even talking about the front line. And we cannot assure to people that if they go to bed in the evening, they will wake up in the morning, because anything could happen. So right now, perhaps is the time to show what's real European capacity and capability is to support Ukraine, and then we will see. Maybe that would be enough for us to fight back with better capacity, and that will give us a stronger position within the negotiations.
Do you think Ukraine will be a part of these negotiations? Very quickly, Kira.
Yes, of course. Otherwise, Ukraine wouldn't accept that, right? We have a 1 million people army, and we have a nation that has very much invested in the war, or invested of everything. So it will be very hard to go ahead and say, well, you go and do this and that. We are here and at this position just because we decided at some point that we are not capitulating, we are not giving up, and nothing has changed from our side. We have suffered an enormous atrocities, but we didn't change our goal, which is to live in a free country where we will figure out our future ourselves. And this is the station that we are taking. And this is what we are going to do. No matter what Donald Trump says, no matter what Putin says, this is our plan.
Okay. We'll leave it there for the moment. Kira, I know you have to leave. Thanks so much for joining us. Kira Rudik, Ukrainian MP and head of the opposition Holos Party. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kira.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Birish, I want to jump in because I have one question here which I actually think is quite interesting from DMC, who asked, why has no one even mentioned a guarantee from a United Nations peacekeeping force instead of a NATO-backed peace guarantee?
Sure, but the word is an issue already, peacekeeping. So if we don't have no peace, there's nothing to keep. So we talk about a robust mission against Russia, then we are on a different discussion, of course. But let me add, Kira said it already. Russia is trying now 3 years to get into Ukraine. And nothing moved. We saw it on the map. So what does that mean? It's a total failure on Russian side. What is America trying to do? Does America want to try to support Russia? If they don't support Ukraine, okay, Russia won't do it anyway. They can't go further because the territory is so huge. So Ukraine is fighting so brave. The question is not, can Ukraine win? Is Russia able to go more than 3 more years, 4 more years? I don't think so. It's our point again to support Ukraine and to stop the war and not to discuss what we all can't do. Not talk about mistakes, not talk about things we can't deliver. We can do so much. And 3 years Ukraine made it against Russia. Nobody expected that. All my military colleagues said they won't, and they do.
Including the then German defense minister who sent 5,000 helmets to Ukraine as a matter of support.
Let's
talk. Since then, Germany has done a lot more.
I think we're the second largest weapon deliverer.
Yes, that is true. Let's just talk about Germany. You know, you belong to the CDU party, and you have been close to Friedrich Merz. The polls are saying, our viewers will know this probably, that Friedrich Merz is tipped to become the chancellor. Maybe he will not get the absolute majority. We will see on the Sunday. But you know, this whole thing about providing support to Ukraine. The role of Germany is important because Germany is the largest economy. So what Germany does makes a difference. But you know, I was listening to some of the election debates, and particularly this debate on German television when there were people, ordinary voters in the studio. All the questions, the majority, the overwhelming majority of questions were to do with higher rents, training for young people, pensions, old age care. I think there was just one question on Ukraine, if at all. I put it to you that amongst the common public, Ukraine is not such a top theme as much as it is potentially at a European level. If that is the case, what mandate will a future chancellor have to send all that aid to Ukraine? Sorry, it's a very long question.
No, it's not. You're quite right. I would make it a little bit larger. Security issues are not on the agenda of the people yet. We are in the middle of Europe, surrounded by friends. We understand that our life is peaceful since 30 years with a reunification of Germany and the integration process of the European Union. We understand that the world is getting more and more peaceful, and we believe this, and we don't want to change our dream. So that's why we try to avoid questions about military strength, about invest in security.
Or military conscription, something that...
Yeah, sure, about reinventing conscription. This is a hard topic for us because it has something to do with military, with fighting, with war. So we try to not to see these kind of issues because we lived the dream, and not just we in Europe, other countries, not just we in Germany, also other countries in Europe did. So we really hope that the world is getting peaceful, and now we realize it's not. So our mindset has to be changed. And I think a new government has a lot of issues in Germany, and I think a lot of countries in the European Union have the same. But one issue is also, how is our part of burden sharing in security in Europe and around us? So a new chancellor, whoever it is, I think it will be Friedrich Merz, and that's good though. I think every new chancellor will have the task to describe to the people that we have to do more burden sharing for security in Europe.
I want to put a comment to you from one of our viewers, Sham, who says, I hope you consider having conscription back in Germany. You touched on it there, and I actually have a question for you on that. But he says, as a Finn, so obviously a viewer here from Finland, I can tell you it's a good way to bring the people together and make everyone feel more safe and aware of security in general. I actually think a lot of people don't realise that about Finland, that they do actually have conscription. So you mentioned that there that people here don't like to really kind of talk about it because it's, you know... If it were to be reintroduced, do you think it would actually have the support to be reintroduced? Do you think that people in Germany have, I don't know if appetite is the right word to say that, to describe it, but is it a realistic option?
Yes, I think so. A majority of, you have lots of polls, a majority said we want to have it back, better than in former times. Of course, young people should gain more out of it. If you talk about a year, for example, they should get some ECTS points for studies. They could get some courses when they do professional training after that. So there should be more benefit. For the parliament, they could do it with simple majority to invent it again. But the question is, do we have to change our constitution that also women are called for conscription then? For that, you need a change of the constitution. But I think that is possible because people understand 1 year service for the country, which could be not just done in the military, it could be done in a fire brigade, it could be done with the Red Cross, which is also military relevant. If you look at the fire brigades fighting in Ukraine cities when a drone hits a house, knowing that maybe a second drone comes, which is so horrible when the ones who try to save lives are killed also. So we need this also for security issues. So I think the society in Germany knows that we need something like a conscription 1 year for the country.
Germany is in a financial hole in many ways. Money is needed for climate policies. It's not there. Money is needed for the defense services. That is also a problem. Not to mention the other social services that need to be provided. Chancellor Scholz, the outgoing chancellor, made a promise in 2022, just days after the outbreak of the Ukraine war, about the so-called Zeitenwende, this change of... What is the English translation we use for Zeitenwende?
I think the word is already used.
Important change of time or something.
And an important watershed moment.
Watershed.
I'm completely forgetting the approved thing that we have for Zeitenwende. I know. I'm sorry. I do apologize. Okay. About 100 billion euros were promised for the upgradation of the German armed forces, and the argument is that nothing has happened on that front in 3 years. Is that correct? I mean, and if it's correct,
no, it's not correct, because it's a huge number. I think many defense ministers would love to have such a package of money to modernize the military. So we're buying vessels, we're buying planes, we're buying smaller things. But that needs a little bit of time. They were not there in the shop, and you could take the vessel with you. So they're coming step by step. We have the personal equipment of the infantryman who's already at the units. So we're going step by step in all kinds of fields that is getting better and better, which is good for the motivation of the soldiers. But one thing is not working yet. It's a number of soldiers. Because you can have the best carriers, you can have the best vessels, planes, and so on, but somebody must drive them, somebody must fly them, somebody must be the boots on the ground that we talked about. Yeah. And from that position on, we are not getting far enough. Our target is 203,000 active soldiers, and we are stable at 180 something. So we are not growing fast enough. So that's why, from my point of view, we very quick should get back to conscription, because without conscription, you have not the number of people who decide when they are in the service to stay longer. Because some percentage of the ones who never wanted to go to the military but had to because of conscription, then decided, oh, it's not so bad, I want to stay. And we don't get them yet. That's why we need conscription. And we need conscription for the main point, to get reservists, to have this 3 times more. Finland has, I think, 5 or 6 times more reservists than active troops. So to get the reservists, so nobody believes that we can defend Germany, the whole own country, and to do our burden sharing at the NATO eastern flank with just 200,000 soldiers. We need the reserve as a second wave and so on. So that's why we need conscription.
But all of this, and I'm just going to, I think it's time to sort of wrap it up a bit. All of this, I mean, all these numbers sound good and impressive, and these are challenges. at the end of the day, all of these numbers are being talked about with a view to go to war. Is Germany prepared to go to war?
Is somebody ever prepared to go to war? The question is also to the other side. Do we build up enough deterrence to avoid war? That's why we are building up and growing our military competencies. Resilience is not the thing that you do for being resilient. It's there because it's the other side of the coin for deterrence. Deterrence you do not to have war. If we have a strong enough military with a huge reserve, then everybody should question, and if other countries in the EU have that too, everybody should question, can we do the next step, maybe not in Ukraine, can we do it in Moldova? Can we do the next step in Lithuania? If we stand together and build up a strong enough military, I think also Putin will learn out of 3 years having not succeeded with the plan. We should be stronger, and very soon, very quick.
I just needed to sort of take that
sobering.
in. But it is indeed sobering.
Yeah, it's a hard topic, but yeah.
No, I'm glad you said what you said and you were frank with that. Should we just have a look at the poll? And I don't know, Cherry, if you closed that poll.
I did close it, actually.
You did not close it?
I did.
Oh, you did? Okay. Do we have some results? Let me note them down as you say it.
It's. I have to say, this chat was so busy, and thanks everyone for participating.
Thank you, everybody, for sending your comments.
It was a lot. So the poll results, we have more than 2,000 votes, 2,200 actually. Let me repeat the questions. Are Trump-Putin talks the only path to peace? The first option that most people voted for, 45%, no, Putin can't be trusted. 22% voted for yes, compromises are needed. And 21% for yes, peace at any price, and 10% voted for no, Ukraine can still win. Is it surprising or?
I think it's very interesting. I just wonder if these poll results were to be put to the American side that says 45% believe Putin can't be trusted. I wonder how they would react to it.
Yeah, I have to say, in many of the comments are actually quite pessimistic about this. Talks that's going on right now. Many people are actually saying that Europe cannot trust the US anymore because, it looks like it's not so reliable, and the EU should actually step up their defense spending.
I'm glad you brought that point up, because I did want to ask you, Patrick, at the Munich Security Conference over the weekend, which is being described as historic, which I personally think is a very mild word to describe what happened there. We were talking about these transatlantic ties, whether the US can, whether Europe can trust the US, whether they're all together. What is your analysis of that? You were there. You were there on a panel as well.
Yeah. I first would say people can have friendships. They can build up friendships between people, between concrete persons. Governments, states, they have interests. We shouldn't even say Germany and US can't be friends. States, countries can't be friends. They have interests, and we should share the interests. And so I have lots of friends in America and US. Our panel was shared by With Honor, an organization of veterans in the US. And they came to us and said, let's do something together. And I said, wonderful, it's a perfect time to show that we can work together and not working aside of us. So I think on, let me call it the working level, also with our military together, I've done lots of exercises with US troops, and it works so perfectly. We've been in Afghanistan and working so close together, also in the headquarters. So on that level, we're really working good together, and there are a lot of personal friendships. The interests, we have to define new, because there is a new government in the US, but we have to understand their positions, and then diplomacy and negotiations go on, and we have to find our shared interests. So I don't really understood this kind of language that was used on the Military Security Conference, but in the end, we knew what happened in advance. It was not shocking, it was not new. Our task is to offer a strong Europe and to be a valid negotiator on the table. That's our task. We can't look to somebody else, we should deliver.
We'll leave it there.
Yeah, because it's right what Cherry said. There's a few comments there saying that the US is out of Europe, and would they be there? And I'll just put this comment before we go, because I thought it was very interesting. It says the US is out of Europe, they're not reliable anymore. That's one comment of many that we have.
Whatever happens, Europe will have to work a lot harder than previous years to try and keep those interests on the same page. Patrick, thanks so much for coming in.
Yeah,
Nehal, thanks so much for that wonderful rap that you did on a very complex and a fast-moving situation. I don't know what's going to happen in the next few hours. Maybe we have something coming from DC or Florida. I haven't been checking my phone. Pablo, thanks so much. Cherry, thanks for moderating that chat. That's about it for today. We're going to be back again next week on Wednesday with a topic that we don't know about as yet.
No, and who knows, because things are moving very rapidly at the moment.
But that topic you'll be able to see on the Tuesday, and then you can join in on our live on the Wednesday.
Leave your comments,
Leave your comments. Tell us what you think, what we could do better. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.